welcome to Oh the Horror. I'm Fedora, and it's time for the movie that did the whole behind-the-scenes dramas and cross-medium alterations before Suicide Squad made it cool. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the movie that preceded it. And while it may not have been the first appearance of Hannibal Lecter on screen, it's easily the most memorable. Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs is a 1991 crime thriller that sees the FBI on the hunt for a deranged serial killer dubbed Buffalo Bill, who's been abducting larger women and skinning them before the authorities find their bodies sometime later. In order to catch this psychopath, the feds look to get inside his head. Thus they send young agent Clarice Starling, played by Jodie Foster, to get help from a man who knows the mind of a deranged psychotic killer better than any other. Another deranged psychotic killer. The brilliant and terrifyingly manipulative Dr. Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter, played by Sir Anthony Hopkins. A former criminal psychologist who, it turns out, was murdering and eating people while on the job. The movie was based on a book by Tom Harris and is regarded by many as one of the best thrillers of all time.
So because of that, obviously the follow-up book would get the film treatment. The problem is though, they spent $10 million to get the rights to make this movie while the book was being written. And as we'll see, that caused a few problems. So, let's see what they were in 2001's Hannibal.
So this movie starts with Hannibal's old prison guard Barney being interviewed about the events of the first movie by Gary Oldman, after the spiders from Lost in Space apparently finished eating his face off. Actually, he's playing a former patient of Hannibal's named Mason Verger, who we'll find out more about later on.
How much?
250,000.
Fuck yeah, you won't be winning the cosplay contest this year, Duct Tape Iron Man.
After that, we meet up with Clarice Starling, now a much more seasoned FBI agent, on her way to a sting operation. And some of you are probably wondering why we're looking at Julianne Moore instead of Jodie Foster, especially after how eager she and Hopkins were to be in it. Well, that eagerness changed drastically after she read the book, and its very, very excessive gore and themes. So not only did she pull out, but also did Silence of the Lambs' original director and screenwriter.
So I can imagine this is how MGM was feeling at this point.
I have the buyer's remorse.
Well, here come the feds in their undercover van, and I think the crooks are sure in for a shocker. I'm not too far off, it seems, as the sting is screwed over by an overenthusiastic local cop who cleverly manages to pin the entire screw-up, massive resulting shootout, and loss of both police and civilian life on Clarice. And he does this by dying in the resulting fight.
That's the patriarchy at work, am I right, my sisters?
The news story about the incident, labelling Clarice as a trigger-happy disgrace, pretty much puts her entire career in the toilet. And speaking of things you find in the toilet, enter Paul Krendler, a slimy little turd in a suit who doesn't really help the situation much, but he does bring Gary Oldman to Clarice's attention, who seems to have some information for her on Hannibal Lecter, who, as we know, escaped at the end of the last movie. She pays Gary a visit, and he recounts for her the last time he met up with Hannibal, which included the standard Saturday night stuff like drinking, drugs, peeling her own face off.
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
And he finally provides her with the new information he has, which is basically just ratting out Barney as his supplier of Hannibal's old stuff.
Not cool, Gary. And to think he was just about to hook you up with Lecter's old toilet seat as well.
We then cut over to Italy, where Hannibal is now hiding out as a museum curator, who gets approached by Italian Magnum PI here about a missing persons case.
Did you happen to check the hors d'oeuvres?
However, he does get some time to send Clarice a letter congratulating her for her latest public shaming, but doesn't leave too many clues in it besides a very particular perfume scent, which they do manage to trace to our Italian cop's jurisdiction. And with Lecter back on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, he figures he could get in on that handsome reward for being the one to catch him.
I mean, it sure beats his current case of chasing down giant, hairy rape monsters.
After Paul comes back, just to remind us quickly that he's a piece of shit,
I always figured him for a queer.
our Italian cop, whose name is actually Inspector Pazzi, goes to see Hannibal to try and get some fingerprint samples to qualify himself for the reward.
People don't always tell you what they're thinking. They just see to it you don't advance in life. I'm sorry, Commendatore. I too often say what I'm thinking.
Please don't eat me. What's that? Nothing, nothing, nothing. Who said anything about $3 million? Failing to get a print at the house, Inspector Pokerface hires some local urchin to try and get one on a silver bracelet he's wearing.
Considering this is the same actor who played Judas Iscariot in the Bible movie, he may need that silver for rent this month.
But whatever, it works. And if you think your balls hurt from that stab wound, buddy, take a second to think how Jesus' balls felt. The print is verified, and now Pazzi could just take his money, point Lecter out, and run at this point, but he doesn't, and continues to make himself as conspicuous as possible in front of Hannibal. And sure, the movie may be skipping over a lot of the details from the novel, like Hannibal's backstory, his obsession with his dead sister, and things like that. But if you're here just to get some more of Anthony Hopkins in this role, you will not be disappointed because, god damn, he is still fantastic.
I think so.
And yet, I don't know, something is still missing. In Silence of the Lambs, the fact that Hannibal was locked up for the entire movie just made him seem a lot more threatening and mysterious to me. It was all about his mind and his manipulation abilities, and the fear of what this guy might do if he ever got out. Yeah, we knew he killed people, and of course he does in that movie too, but that isn't what made him such an interesting character. Well, it's been fun, but Hannibal is done with the bullshit. And after getting out of Pazzi that Gary Oldman is after him for revenge, he sends him on his way.
Ciao.
God, this is the worst thing that happened to the streets of Florence since tea time.
The man himself is a mite disappointed in this, so he goes for plan B, which is paying off Paul,
Cocksucker.
to frame Clarice with evidence theft in hopes that her being even further in the public shit will draw Lecter out. And it works. And we get back to what I was saying before about Hannibal being free. There's just no mystery to him anymore. He floats around, he taunts her, but it's nothing any other obsessed predator in a thriller hasn't done. And that's really annoying because Lecter is anything but ordinary. It's just not where he should be. After our heroes banter a little, Hannibal is jumped by Gary Oldman's thugs straight off the set of whatever Mafia TV show was popular in 2001, where Gary plans to slowly feed Hannibal to a pack of specially trained man-eating pigs.
Did Caesar Romero write your revenge plots for you, Gary?
Luckily, Clarice arrives just in time to save him.
Good evening, Clarice. Just like old times.
Shut up.
Yes, Clarice. You remember the screaming of the pigs? Wait, that's not right.
But she gets shot in the shoulder soon after, so as Hannibal carries her to safety, Gary Oldman is instead fed to the pigs. And the next time we see him, he ends up looking like somebody's Tumblr profile picture. Whew, well, after all that excitement, I think a nice romantic candlelit dinner at Paul's lake house is in order.
Good, you brought the wine.
What's this? Biff's Drive-In Home Blend? You cheap bastard.
So when Clarice finally comes to, she heads downstairs towards that delicious smell. And here we are. The most famous scene from the movie. Everybody talked about it. Some think it's gross, some think it's hilarious. But as for me, I'm just wondering what mirror dimension we live in right now, where Hannibal cut the brain on the right side, but the hole is on the left. Weird. And here is where the biggest changes were made from the book. Now, I have not read it myself, but I have done the research, and even seen for myself throughout the movie at various points that hints are made that all the betrayals that Clarice experienced from the FBI, all the shit she goes through, and her growing obsession with Hannibal, it eventually leads her into actually submitting to him. They eat Paul's brain, they have sex, and then they flee together. But this ending, the book's ending, is one of the main reasons that Jodie Foster wanted out of the project. And by the time they edited it and Julianne Moore came aboard, it was already far too late in the process to make changes. So all that development is just sort of brushed aside. Making moments like these...
You ever think about him at all?
Oh, at least 30 seconds of every day. Can't help it. He's always with me.
What the hell are you doing sitting there in the dark, Starling?
Thinking about cannibalism.
amount to nothing. Clarice manages to get some handcuffs on Hannibal, and with the police already on their way and his refusal to harm her, Hannibal instead chops his own hand off in order to escape.
I'm honestly not picking these movies out on purpose, it just sort of happens.
And so this movie comes to an end, with Hannibal hopping on the next Qantas out of town and feeding some brain leftovers to small children.
It tastes like...
Cocksucker.
And that was Hannibal.
Viewing this from a standard moviegoer's perspective, there is a lot to like in Hannibal. Hopkins and Oldman are brilliant, and the visuals are gorgeous, combined with the soundtrack as well, gives the movie sort of a stage performance feel. On the flip side though, all the deviations from the book just pissed too many people off. Removing all the pseudo-psychology parts and focusing just on the gore. Also, I couldn't really buy Julianne Moore as Clarice. She just didn't seem to have the emotional connection to Hannibal like Jodie did. Her stone-faced performance just made it seem like this was any old case to her. I don't think the movie on its own is bad per se. It's just a huge step down from Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon, released 1 year later, which is easily one of my favourite movies.
Well, we've seen the chronological end of Lecter on screen, but next time we'll see where it all began. And until then, I'm Fedora, this is the Horror, save a screen for me, and we'll see you next time.
I'm your brain, part of the central nervous system. Your cranium's my home, and if you wanna learn, then listen. I'm the boss of all the functions in your body. I weigh about 3 pounds, but I'm the leader of the party. The cerebrum controls your thinking.